Hello and welcome to another episode of Back of the Grid. I'm your host this week, Tom. I'm joined as always by Stu.
Hello.
And Chris.
Hello. Stu having a nice little dance to the intro music there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do love a little, get my groove on.
Yeah. So, Spanish Grand Prix, gentlemen. We have, I think a decent race for Spain. How do you two think
I think
it
a
fared?
very good race for Spain.
I think finally a normal Formula One Grand Prix weekend without any shenanigans, without any tomfoolery.
And there's one little bit.
Yeah.
There's one little bit. I'm sure it'll come up at some point.
But...
Okay. I will wait until that comes up, whatever that is. I'm excited to find out what you refer to there.
It was good, though. Like, that's one of the best races at that track for a very long... It's almost like taking the stupid chicane away, like everyone's been saying for about the last 8 years. It was a good idea the whole time. Weird, right?
Yeah. Who knew?
Do we think that was the prime cause for it being better? Or do you think it's a combination of cars and that?
Yeah, I think even I don't think it's necessarily even the car thing. I think I think every car, because the speed is so high, it means that the toe is so strong when you get to the end of that straight that there was it wasn't just the Red Bull that had mighty DRS. You know, every car had really, really powerful DRS, it seemed like, down the end of the straight. So some of the closing speeds, as we found out in qualifying, were just absolutely hectic as they were catching each other up down the straight. And I think that is purely down to the maximum speed that those cars will do down that straight. It's one of the fastest. It's made it into one of the fastest braking zones in all of Formula One, I think.
Yeah.
It must be.
And it makes setup for the rest of the circuit kind of a bit of a compromise as well, because top-end speed is that much more important now. Like, they kind of have to compromise on everything else, which just makes it that much more interesting.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to compare it to other circuits like that. Like, the closest thing I can think in comparison is probably going to be the start-finish straight at Monza. Because the way you come off the parabolica,
Mexico as well,
maybe Mexico as well, yeah. Like they've all got that similar vibe, haven't they? Like a really fast carrier speed through the final corner, and then punching it down straight.
In race trim, that is a lift still. That final corner.
Oh
it's
yeah.
Not no cars taking that car flat through.
It's just about what you're carrying through it more than anything.
Here's the interesting tidbit for you. Only one driver actually went flat through the final corner in Q3.
I wonder who that was.
Have a guess.
Max Verstappen?
Fernando
It was not
Alonso.
Max Verstappen, actually.
Fernando Alonso.
Close that. It was actually Lance Stroll, the only man to go flat through the final corner. However, by going flat through the final corner, he was actually had one of the slowest minimum speeds through there because he had to put on so much more steering angle to get through it flat. Whereas, I think it was the McLarens were some of the fastest because they both just had, a small lift at corner entry, then back on the power, and they actually had a much higher minimum speed than Stroll just keeping his foot pinned.
It was interesting qualifying, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Really good again. Qualifying this year is just so exciting.
If Max Verstappen wasn't in a league of his own this season, then this season would be absolutely amazing for racing.
Right?
You just wouldn't be able to call it. It'd be like, what was it, 2012 when we had 5 or 6 winners?
Yeah.
In 7 different winners for a few different teams in the 7 first races. It was that year, and I feel like if we'd not, I need to check the results for this, but it feels like that kind of season if Max Verstappen isn't just winning everything. So yeah, qualifying has been amazing. I think the really interesting thing about qualifying was the fact that the circuit had, I guess, I don't know whether this is what you were getting at for the tomfoolery aspect kind of thing, but the first quali session where there was essentially a river flowing across the track, but no one could see it because of the sort of the nuances of the way the light was hitting the track and the kind of tarmac that it is and the angle that the drivers are looking at. They literally could not see the difference in surface from the water going across the track, and that's why there were all those incidents in the first quali session. But even then, throughout qualifying, it was catching people out. And I think it would be. I mean, a lot. I think most people looked at that grid and were like, "Whoa!" Like people are drawing conclusions. Where have McLaren come from? Where have Alpine come from? Where have Haas come from? Where have all these teams come from? What's happened to the pace of the Aston? Mercedes upgrade didn't work. All these sort of wild conclusions coming from one session. And it wasn't until you get into the race when it sort of halfway through the race, you start to realize, oh, actually, it was a really, really mixed up grid in the end. It was a really unusual sort of end to qualifying. So, but I mean, it led to a really, really cool race. It led to a lot of cars being out of position, unbeknownst to sort of most of the audience. And yeah, it was a very, very good Spanish Grand Prix, I thought, ultimately.
Yeah, all played out well. Led to Max's 40th win in Formula One. I don't know if I feel like surprised or disappointed by that number. Like, yes, it's a high number, but for some reason it feels like he should already have more. I don't know.
I guess
what my sort of point with that is
most of those have come in the last couple of years, haven't they?
Yeah, like when we've got 20-something race seasons, 40 doesn't seem as big of a number as it feels, if that makes sense. Like, I mean, in the course of a season, he could like triple that total in reality. So it's weird. Like, it's a huge number, but it doesn't feel it anymore.
Yeah, over the course of a season, he could add 33% to that. Yeah, another 33%.
But I suppose when you consider the cars that he's been in, what the Red Bull have had before now, and spanning back to 2016 here at Spain as well as his first win. Yeah. So like, I suppose when you spread it out over that distance, it makes a lot more sense. But yeah, it's a mighty
but then you
total.
look at I mean, the only reason he won that one was because the two Mercedes crashed into each other, if you remember. But
very true.
Having said that, and Mercedes, I think that 2016 season, Mercedes only lost one race. I think that might have been the one
probably
race
that one.
Lost,
yeah,
maybe. I think I don't. Again, I don't have the record book open in front of me right now, but off the top of my head, I think that
maybe Ferrari nicked one that season, maybe, but
it was a particularly Mercedes dominant season, wasn't it? The 2016 one, because that was the Rosberg one, and they were just both neck and neck throughout the whole year, pretty much hammer and tong all year, and it was great. It was a good season. For that reason, regardless of what you think of Mercedes, you do want to see two drivers competing with each other, and that's what it gave us, and that's I'm fine with that.
It's mad you're saying about how quickly, like, these days they can rack up these records. Like, Tsunoda has had 50 starts now. Like,
wow.
Not that many years ago, 50 starts was like a real milestone for an F1 driver.
Yeah,
and Tsunoda feels like such a newbie to the grid still.
It's like 4, maybe even 5 seasons once upon a time. 50 starts.
It's ridiculous.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
that
crazy.
Is hectic, that.
Yeah.
Goodness.
I mean, just adds to Max's dominance this year. You've already alluded to it, Stu, that he's kind of just on another level. 5 wins from the 7 races we've had so far, and hasn't finished a race lower than second. So 53 points over Perez. Is it going to slowly start slipping away from Sergio, from Checo?
If he doesn't get his act together, it is.
Yeah, he's had
if it hasn't already.
These last 2 race weekends have really changed the complexion of this season, haven't they? It's been such a poor couple of races for him.
Yeah. Did you see the Nico Rosberg Christian Horner interview?
Yes, I did. I know what you're referring to there.
Yeah, so Christian really, really took a dislike to the question that Nico asked him.
No.
And he was asking him basically asked him if Sergio was underperforming, and he turned around and was like, "Oh, well, you like to analyze the drivers now you're not driving, don't you? You like to have a little dig at the drivers now you're not driving." And then he somehow deflected the question to be about George Russell leaving the track at through turn 2.
Did he?
And apparently getting.
Sorry, he did mention that. Yeah, he did mention that.
Yeah, he mentioned he sort of deflected it into that, and it was like, well, Perez is underperforming though, isn't he? The second presenter comes in, and they're like, yeah, but is he underperforming? And
he's such a
what
politician.
Do you guys think? Do you think he's underperforming, or do you think?
I think he's had a bad couple of races, but I guess that's the difference of caliber between a good, maybe even a great driver, and a champion. Like Lewis and Max have terrible quali sessions and somehow, I mean, yes, fair enough. Both, when they've done this, have had top of the field cars, but they've still fought their way through the pack to get back to maybe not always the podium, but there or thereabouts and keep the fight alive. Sergio, fair enough, Monaco is not an easy place to do that, but with Verstappen having, 23 seconds gap or something like that, Sergio Perez should, in theory, be able to close down and at least get on the podium, if not be behind his teammate. In reality,
yeah,
I think at a circuit like that.
Like if Verstappen had started 11th in that race, you'd probably expect him to still have won it. Like
Probably.
Especially when most of the grid demonstrated that overtaking was very much possible.
Yeah.
It like Red Bull tried to say that fourth was better than their models estimated Perez could finish, but
yeah, they had him down for fifth, didn't they?
Yeah, I don't know. It's like, to be fair, the race itself, I thought Perez did a perfectly fine job, but these last two big qualifying mistakes have been just...
It undoes it.
I mean, the Monaco one was inexcusable. Like, you just don't do that in Q1 in Monaco.
And the whole Monaco weekend, he just a complete shocker, just like he did in Australia.
Head had gone, yeah. And this weekend as well, it was just a silly mistake, pushing maybe a bit too hard at a point you didn't necessarily need to.
Well, that was the area that a lot of the drivers were getting caught out, though.
True.
That was the patch where he'd gone over. I think a lot of them were going through it without even realising they'd gone through it and maybe losing a little bit of grip. But it was one of those situations where if you get it just at the wrong time, you get a little bit unlucky. I do think that kind of ruined Perez's race weekend a little bit. I think he did get... I'd say he got a little bit unlucky. I wouldn't say he's necessarily badly underperforming. I think he ought to be matching his teammate. I think that's the minimum, isn't it, for any Formula One driver, is to at least match your teammate. And he's not doing that. So on that basis, I suppose you would say he's underperforming. But I don't think he's had the best look so far this season either.
I think Chris's words probably sum it up, though, to be fair, where he said the race performance was perfectly fine. Perfectly fine doesn't win championships. Perfectly fine brings home points, contributes towards a Constructors' Championship if you've got a star in the other car, but perfectly fine will not win a world championship, not a driver's championship.
A star in a reasonably priced car.
Yeah, pretty much.
I also think, Chris, you nailed it when you said, you took the words out of my mouth when you were talking about him. You know, if the roles were reversed, then I think it's a different situation. I think, you're not with Perez. You kind of think you're never sure how far up that order he's going to get, or whether he's going to get on the podium. And I think especially now, sort of some teams have brought upgrades and the field's tightening up a little bit. Whereas if Verstappen's in that situation, he's just elbows out, getting ahead, no matter what. He wants that race win. And I don't think Perez doesn't want the race win. I just think that Perez maybe isn't as well equipped to achieve the race win. I think that's what it is in that situation.
Yeah. And like it was the same in the Hamilton and Bottas years. Like, if you have Hamilton starting in the bottom half of the grid, you kind of expected him to find his way to the front, whereas Bottas, he'd maybe get his way back to the podium, but you never really expected him to have that extra bit that takes them there. And there's just certain drivers have got that and other drivers haven't.
Yeah. I'd say so.
Nice.
I'm going to move us on to Mercedes because they were essentially the number 2 team this weekend, I would say, overall. I mean, there may have been times I didn't quite look it, but overall, the outcome of this weekend, I would say they were the second best team there, both from a driver point of view and from a car point of view.
Well, I think overall driver lineup, I think you'd probably put Mercedes on. You know, if you're assessing purely driver lineup, I think this weekend they probably had the best overall driver lineup on balance.
Yeah.
Obviously, Red Bull getting the win with one of their drivers is a huge achievement, but their second driver isn't doing enough to I guess that. Well, I mean, look at the result. The result was their two drivers in between the win and fourth place.
I think
Perez. So
I think the last thing for him to sort of work on is probably that one lap pace, because it seemed that both of them struggled more on those light fuel loads, really pushing the car. I know George was saying a lot about, taking the weight out. He was finding that there was a lot of bouncing in the high-speed corners, whereas in other sessions he'd not found it. So he was struggling a bit more in quali. And just saying that, small changes were making a big difference in the car, which it's a completely revamped car over the last two races. So it's probably going to take a little bit of time to find what changes work and what effect they have. So I can't really blame either of them with the quali performance, but they did look good aside from that, I think.
They're still looking for they're definitely still looking for the sweet spot. But if this is the net result and they're still looking for the sweet spot, then that's a very, very good result for them.
Exactly.
I think they were heavily compromised in Q2 with the collision that they had.
Yeah.
Well,
that was bizarre.
So here's my tomfoolery moment. This is the moment I was referring to with tomfoolery.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, well, I mean, with this, it was kind of, it was a huge miss. It was clearly it wasn't clearly a huge miscommunication. It looked quite it looked a bit weird at the time, but it turns out that Russell had been compromised by a few. He's kind of like been worked out of position just through having to make way for faster cars and people that were on laps. So before he knew it, he had Hamilton on him, who was starting his lap as well, because Russell had to abort a lap. So there was supposed to be sort of a step between them. Russell was supposed to be finishing his lap as Hamilton caught up, but because Russell had to abort a lap, he ended up being about to start a lap as Hamilton caught up. Hamilton didn't realise that. Russell didn't realise Hamilton was catching him up, and Russell's looking at Sainz ahead of him to try and get a bit of a tow and to get a good start on his lap. So he doesn't even know Hamilton's there because he's not looking behind him, and no one's told him that Hamilton's coming up behind him. Yeah. And that led to the sort of really, really hairy moment. It could have been a really hairy moment, but luckily, luckily for Mercedes and for Hamilton and for Russell, it worked out okay. But yeah, it was a very, very, very sketchy moment, and I think that obviously that compromises Russell's lap clearly, and that's why he ended up where he was on the grid. And I think the same for Hamilton. I think when you have an incident like that and you're not able to get that extra lap and get the maximum out of the car, that doesn't set you up very well for the final run in Q3, because you've lost a lap almost. So, well, you've lost the lap, haven't you? So, yeah, I think if Hamilton had not had that incident, and if that whole thing didn't shake out the way it was, I think they probably would have been at least a little bit further up the grid, especially how tight that grid was in qualifying. Yeah,
I think that's a key point for them, isn't it? It's that's the game changer, really, isn't it? Is a little bit of miscommunication between the team, I think, where the drivers aren't aware of each other's situations when they're coming across each other. I mean, like you said, Russell didn't even really know Lewis was there. It was definitely one of the Ferraris, wasn't it? Did you say it was Sainz? I can't remember who it was.
Yeah.
Was kind of like sort of trundling down the outside, and it was almost like
he was just finishing a lap.
He was just finishing a lap and like slowing down and moving out of the way. So Russell's making sure he's well clear of him, and obviously Sainz is having to stay out of the way of the pit exit as well in case anyone's coming out on. There's a whole scenario playing out there, and like you say, the last thing Russell's doing, unfortunately, in that moment, is checking that outside mirror because he's looking at what's going on over the right front of his car.
It's pretty silly.
And for the team, it all happens pretty fast, to be fair, because George, like you said, had to back out of starting his lap that he was about to start to allow Sainz through to finish that lap in the first place, coming through the last couple of corners. George had to back out to get out of the way of Sainz in the first place, which is kind of what led Hamilton to catch him up to begin with. And it's all happened really quickly, and the team haven't had the opportunity, I guess, to say, Lewis is behind you, or warn Lewis that George is actually about to start a hot lap as well. And
another it's another thing with this like new layout. Like for the drivers going through the final corner without braking, your run up to a qualifying lap kind of starts 2 corners before it ends. So
starts back at turn 12.
Yeah. So there's that much more pressure on the teams to inform their drivers of who's around and who's coming to find a gap properly, which obviously we saw another driver who got caught out by that twice, but we'll get to him.
Yeah.
He's had no luck, Gasly, has he, this season?
So while we're still on Mercedes, obviously they've bought upgrades, they've worked.
Looks that way.
Probably still too early to say they're like definitively second fastest, I think. It seemed to be, it was like cooler than I think most people expected. Definitely cooler than Spain tends to be. It's a very tyre wear heavy track. Like that does kind of play to their strengths anyway. So
especially against Ferrari.
It's definitely and Ferrari opposite end of the scale.
Mercedes have been good in Barcelona in recent years as well.
Yeah, it's always been a good track for them.
It's been a good track for them,
So yeah, definitely too early to say they've leapfrogged Aston Martin. I mean, in terms of points they've gone second in the constructors now. But and we'll refer you back to our conversation about one of their drivers last week if you're interested in why that might be. But yeah, I mean, it's looking good for them. They've done a heck of a job to turn what was a pretty ropey looking car into, at least this weekend,
a different car.
Almost a whole different car.
Turn one car into another car. That's what they've done with the same chassis still. I think it is promising. I think and at the rate that we know that they can develop, effectively over the course of the season within the budget cap. So because we've seen it happen, we saw it happen last year, and that was with a concept that didn't really ever properly work, if we're completely honest.
Yeah.
So now they seem to have sort of moved into the more popular concept and got a car that's, as they put it, a new baseline. And this baseline, if this is the baseline and it puts them P2, then that's a pretty good baseline. So there's definitely potential for that team to really develop it and make it into something, maybe even make it into a race winner and pick up the scraps. Possibly, if they're good in Canada, then I think they'll be good all season. That's what I'd say about this.
I suppose the question now is how much of their budget have they spent on getting to this new baseline, and how much have they got left to...
It doesn't matter, does it? You could just keep spending and just pay a bit of a fine to the season. So,
as long as you spend it on food and catering, Stu.
Develop a new floor and call it catering.
Let's move to Ferrari. So, an abysmal weekend for Leclerc. Just didn't seem to have the pace. So, an unprecedented starting position for him.
Something was fundamentally wrong with that car or the way he was driving it. Like something.
Yeah.
They sort of said they hadn't worked it out yet, but there was something very strange going on.
They brought some updates this weekend, and it looks like they potentially may have had the opposite effect.
Yeah, well, I mean,
they were hoping for.
Yeah, when you look where his teammate was overall, yes, albeit he couldn't hold off the Mercs, but he put it second on the grid in quali.
Yeah,
and held off everybody else and finished fourth. So there was only the Mercs and the one Red Bull. Was he fourth? Was he fifth? I've completely.
He was fifth.
Sorry, he was fifth in the end, wasn't he? I apologise. Perez got past him as well. So the Red Bulls and the Mercs were the two to get beyond him, which we kind of touched on a minute ago with the tyre wear here at Spain, Catalonia, and the fact that Ferrari do not do well at high deck circuits. Yeah. So somewhat expected in that regard when the Mercs always do well on the tyres and the Red Bull seems to this season. A fairly expected weekend for Carlos, but just an abysmal one from the other side of the garage. Do we think there's some upgrades that are purely with Leclerc at this point? And that's where the problem lies?
As far as I've seen, they brought the same thing to both cars, I think, because they've kind of abandoned the bathtub side pods, haven't they? They've gone for a more kind of flat-topped side pod. I don't know. It's just... that car just isn't working for those drivers. I mean, obviously, in qualifying, Sainz had the pace of the front row. It's a bit of a cliche, but I feel like if that circuit was in any other country, Sainz probably wouldn't have been on the front row.
Yeah.
But it was a hell of a qualifying lap he put in to do that.
It's the extra few tenths that home crowd give you, isn't it?
I think even starting on the front row for Sainz, like he never really ever, at no point in that race did he even look like a threat for a podium to me.
Yeah.
Even at the very start, I think he got, he kind of got muscled out by Verstappen in the first place, and I guess into through turns 1 and 2, and I think there's other drivers on that grid who wouldn't have given up that place so easily. They would have taken the fight to him. But Sainz is just thinking, you know what? I know this car's not going to win this race, so there's no point me wasting my tyres racing him. When I what I'm doing is I'm salvaging what I can, because we know we've got high degradation. We know we're going to move backwards in this race.
The second I saw that Sainz was starting on the softs, to me that said, we know we have no chance here. Let's stick on the softs and have a shot at a bit of a glory run and lead a few laps at the start. Like, that's all that said to me. Like,
wow, yeah.
And to be fair, he nearly did. Like, he got alongside to turn 1, he nearly pulled it off, but going around the outside of Verstappen into turn 1 is never going to work.
Yeah, well, I mean, it did. It was turn 2 where Verstappen managed to shut the door on him. That's kind of what happened. Verstappen got better traction on the exit of 1, and he did close the door on him, but he was well within his right to do that because he was ahead. So I guess Sainz always had to back out of it, but there was room. There was still room on the inside for him to get up on the curbs and sort of keep that fight going for a little bit. I do think he backed out of it a little bit early, but like we say, it's not really the race he's having on.
No, not at all
this weekend.
Yeah.
So there is very little point in wrecking your tyres in the first 4 or 5 corners of a race.
Yeah.
It's one of those moments of picking your battles, isn't it? Like, yeah, it would have been nice for him to get out there and lead some laps in front of his home crowd, but that's not ultimately the race he's in at the moment, especially with, like you say, with the degradation. And I think the only hope they would have had is like kind of what Chris is saying of use the softs to kind of leapfrog and somehow hope that like an alternate strategy kind of plays out for them with clean air or something like that. I think that's kind of the best that they were hoping for. But yeah,
I mean, he did soft, medium, hard, which was not many others did that to any. Like everyone ahead of him did a completely different strategy.
Yeah.
It just feels a bit like, well, no, we'll throw these tires on next, see what happens.
Yeah.
Throw the spaghetti at the wall, see if it sticks.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. Moving a little bit further down the grid, which feels weird for this team so far this season, to Aston Martin, officially now their worst finish of the season, which seems weird because there'd be a time not long ago where this would have still been quite a strong finish for them, to be brutally honest with you.
How times change.
Yeah. Alonso not had the best weekend compared to recent times. Picked up floor damage in Q1. He had a little bit of an excursion on the final corner, didn't he? Do we know if that's where the main damage occurred?
I think it was, yeah.
He's kind of off in the gravel a little bit.
That. He did well to
funnily enough,
backwards in the wall.
I feel we've seen him somehow survive that exact same off before in
the
recent
McLaren,
times.
I think. Yeah,
yeah. I feel like we've seen that before.
That feels familiar.
I'm sure the Twitterverse or somewhere else on the internet will correct us if I'm wrong. But yeah, like too much damage to the car meant it didn't really have the pace. 8th on the grid overall. Stroll, after recent criticism from us, decided to try and maybe prove a point. Definitely listening. So yeah, finished 6th overall. Out-qualified Alonso as well. Decent weekend for Lance.
A broken car.
Yeah, also had a broken car. Also had a broken car.
But
it was better. Like,
sorry, yeah, a lot. Sorry, I thought you were saying Stroll also had a broken car. You're saying Alonso had a broken car. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, which is maybe the only reason
he was being far more disparaging than you were giving him credit for.
Yeah.
I mean, Stroll's had 2 pointless finishes in a row, so, back in sixth. It was decent enough from him. Like there was some all right wheel to wheel stuff. His pace was a lot closer to a lot. I mean, Alonso could definitely have passed him in the closing stages if he wanted to, but he sort of just chose not to.
Could have easily passed him.
Their relationship is so strange.
Yeah, he could have mopped up. He could have hung him out to dry. But
yeah, like Alonso basically said, like neither of us were catching the cars ahead.
Yeah,
we're neither of them are in a particular drivers' championship fight. They're there to get points for the team. Exactly. Them being the other end of it, which I guess that makes sense.
I think Alonso's got the confidence to sacrifice a couple of points.
Exactly.
And because he knows he's going to muller him all season anyway.
There's also possibly just an element of a long game, like keep Lance happy, keep the team happy. Like when the tough decision needs to be made in Alonso's favour for something at some point, all these brownie points that he's built up over.
Forward,
exactly. He's a wily guy, Fernando. He doesn't do anything for nothing. Let's put it that way.
That is for sure.
Yeah. Moving a bit further down to Fernando's old team in Alpine. Upgrades that seem to be working for them this weekend. What do you think?
They look good. Their last couple of weekends, they've started again. Like it was a bit after Monaco. Like, do they just have a car that works well here? But like, they're moving in the right direction. They're doing the business with the upgrades there.
Yeah.
Gasly was a bit unfortunate to get the 6th place grid drop, blocking who's it? He blocked Verstappen and I think Norris, I want to say, or what?
Maybe.
There was definitely Verstappen. Did you hear the Alonso radio message? Basically, doing the stewarding. So during the session, Stu's shaking his head, so I'll explain for Stu and the benefit of anyone else who hasn't heard it. Alonso was behind Gasly and Verstappen was coming through, and basically he saw Gasly hold Verstappen up and was straight on the radio saying, the Alpine there just definitely blocked the Verstappen car. I would say that's probably at least a 3-place grid drop for tomorrow.
Such a snitch.
But dishing out the penalty as well, that was the funny bit.
Yeah, seriously.
It was basically just being a steward for the day.
There was some weird radio. There was another radio message where Verstappen recognized Helmut Marko's ringtone.
Yeah.
Strange.
So weird.
This is what happens when you go to a circuit that you all know like the back of your hand. You're just on rails and notice weird stuff. That's what it is.
Either that or he spends a lot of time with Daddy Helmut.
All that. Could well be that.
It was a shame for Gasly. Gasly 4th in qualifying was so good.
Yeah.
Until he wasn't, because he.
Yeah.
To be fair, the 2 blocking incidents were bad, and I think them getting penalised was the right thing. But I also don't think either were particularly Gasly's fault. I think it was the team not giving him the info he needed. So,
well, they have accepted joint responsibility.
Yeah, and they didn't give Gasly any points on his license, which I feel like in seasons gone by they probably would have done because they just dished out points like they were going out of fashion.
Specifically to Gasly as well.
Yeah, mostly to Gasly. So I think probably it's a shame for him, but probably the right choice in terms of penalties.
Yeah.
But
another weird radio was the Russell sweating onto his visor, thinking it was raining, wasn't it?
Wes was just saying if we're talking radio.
I can understand that though. I think that's because his hair he'd not put his hair back through his balaclava all the way, so he had one strand of hair dangling down in front of his face, and when he started sweating onto that, then he'd pull his brakes, and obviously everything flies forward, including the sweat off your forehead, which is, I think, actually a really interesting illustration of just how much G-force these cars generate under braking. They're doing 5G, I think, when they're pulling the brakes. So the sweat is literally coming off your forehead and splatting against the visor in front of your eyes.
I did enjoy those messages though. It's
awkward.
Telling it's raining, and his engineer was like, "Okay." Then he's like, "Is anyone else reporting the rain?" No, it's just you, mate. I'm not quite sure what's going on out there.
Yeah.
But I think
very
like
odd.
it showed because Russell's been quite sort of, he's had a few in recent races. He's definitely sort of, you're hearing a lot more kind of punchy radio from him, and he's a very very switched on driver. And people are saying, oh, it's a bit embarrassing that he made this error, but actually I think it just shows how switched on he is, and how he's ready to pounce at any opportunity that comes forward. He's thinking about the wider situation. He's not just thinking about breaking point, apex, exit, corner exit, and all that kind of stuff. He's got a lot more going on up there, and he's able to strategize from inside the car in his second year at Mercedes, which is
totally.
it's good.
Yeah. I want to move us to Alfa because I want to talk a little bit about Zhou Guanyu, because very solid drive from him, from a car that's
really good,
not been up to much this year, really. And yeah, it's like a good solid points finish for him.
Yeah, pretty solid points finish. I think he bottled it a little bit in the fight with Tsunoda, and Tsunoda got a needless penalty for that.
Interesting.
I find this one a weird one. Like, I feel that it was a bit of a soft penalty, but it's one of those things
that was penalty for
Tsunoda, because it was a bit of a back out, but there was definitely some pre-establishment of rules of engagement really into that corner, which Tsunoda, by all accounts, from what I've seen, didn't adhere to. So it's one of those things where if something's been set in the briefing to a certain standard and you don't adhere to it, but I think the penalty was a little bit harsh, but yeah.
I think when you look at you look at the way Russell went off, no one got a penalty for that, and I think he had a similar amount of room to what Russell had, and I think the same for, Sainz stuck with it into through turn 1 into turn 2, and again there was probably a similar amount of space there. So they argued that Zhou was marginally ahead, but I don't think he was any more ahead than what Russell was at the start of the race. So Russell didn't get a penalty for that, and I don't think Russell deserved a penalty for that either.
My initial reaction was that it was really harsh to give him a penalty. The more I've watched it, like, Zhou was marginally ahead as they were going through, and Tsunoda definitely opens up the steering mid-corner. Like, if Zhou hadn't backed out of it, I think they would have made contact. The more I watch it, the more I can see the logic of the penalty. And again, it's the whole rules of engagement thing. It's like, should you be able to claim that you've won a corner just by, slinging your car into a gap and saying, "Oh, well, I've got ahead"? But I think the difference is the line that Zhou took in. He would have made the corner had Tsunoda not been alongside him, opening up his steering. So it's borderline, but I can see the rationale for that being a penalty.
Yeah, I think when you look at like the situations of Carlos at the race start, there was one where one of the Alpines was coming out of the pits. Was it Ocon? And then Hülkenberg was sort of round the outside of him and had to kind of back out of it again a little bit. To be fair, that was a good little battle which involved these two as well, wasn't it? Because Zhou and Tsunoda were behind all of that, sort of then inadvertently battling with Hülkenberg because they've been held up a little bit by Ocon coming out. And I think that like all those different scenarios sort of played out maybe the way this one should have. And I'm kind of with Chris that there was just that little bit of the extra move maybe is what led to the penalty. Like,
I think the FIA were bored. I think they wanted to make it known to the world that the FIA exists. I think it was one of those because they'd been fairly incident free up until that point, and it's that the FIA hadn't had any impact on the race, and I think they thought, here's an opportunity for us to say hello to the world.
I think the difference is though when you look at like Tsunoda against Was it? I'm trying to think who overtook him. One of the Alpines overtook Tsunoda in a very similar way to what Zhou Guanyu was trying to do, and it played out because he left that room, and it was almost like I don't want that to happen again. So he tried to close the door a bit. Is how I sort of look at it. Like when I think what you've got to kind of do is put all those similar incidents like side by side on quick follow up, and you can sort of see the difference that I sort of agree with Chris on. I think when you sort of go back to back with them all.
Yeah,
it's funny. I'm watching the replays of it now, and from Zhou's on board, it's like he gets ahead, then you suddenly see what looks like a front wing driving at his front right wheel, but then you see the head on, and they're a good foot apart, and Zhou's just suddenly like, I'm going to turn left now, and just missed the corner completely.
He's gone he's backed out of it way early for me. I think
he did bail out very easily.
Yeah, I think
I agree with that bit
100%.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Like. It was, I don't think it was quite fair the way he was being pushed off, but he bailed way too quick. I would also say
it almost felt like he went into the overtake with bailing out of it already in his mind.
And to be fair, then I see Stu's point of, well, you know, like, is it really worth a penalty because he's chosen to bail out way sooner than he should have, like. And if you believe he was fully in the right, he should have maybe stuck in it a bit more. So I'd see both sides of it, but I see why it went the way it did as well.
It's hard because I think Zhou and Tsunoda both had really good drivers, and I think they both deserve points for it. So it's a shame that Tsunoda ended up getting dropped out of the points because of that penalty.
Yeah, true. Very true.
Also, just while we're on turn one incidents, there was a lot of, like, I mentioned earlier in the episode about Christian Horner talking about Russell bailing out through turn two. There was absolutely nothing wrong with the way that all worked out. He rejoined in the same position that he was in when he bailed out. I think Christian was trying to paint it like he'd gained 5 places from that one bailout, and actually that's not what happened at all. I think he gained 3 places just off the line. Then he gained another place through turn one. Then he bailed as he was sort of just behind. He was just ahead of Piastri. Had to bail. Took the right, did the agreed method of rejoining the track in the same position that he was when he bailed. So he's now ahead of Piastri and behind. I think it was Hülkenberg. It was one of the Haas. Yeah. And then he followed that car around for a little bit. Managed to get around the Haas, and then the McLaren ahead of Norris pitted.
Yeah, because it must have been damage, wasn't it?
Off the line.
He got
and then that's how he made up 5 places on the first lap, and then he was battling Alonso for a while. I watched this whole sort of first 3 or 4 laps on his onboard, and actually really compelling. It's a really, really good watch. If you've got F1 TV, it's worth going and finding.
Yeah, it is a very, that kind of escape road, the way you rejoin if you miss the corner, is actually really well designed, like all through F2 and F3 as well. Anytime somebody took it, like, it's never going to be perfect, but I never saw anybody take the escape road and be either massively advantaged or disadvantaged by doing it. It all kind of then always shook out pretty close to where they should be. Like, it's
it did exactly what it needed to do.
Well-designed solution.
Yeah, very good. I agree with that. That did occur to me while I was watching it as well. So,
I think that what we've had it like 2 or 3 seasons now that it's been like that, and I've never really had a problem with it since it came in. So it works. It just works well.
There was one, I can't remember who it was in F2, missed the corner, and he basically rejoined the track, then clearly remembered he was supposed to go around the bollard and drove back off the track into the escape road, round the bollard, and then back on a second time. And I was like, is he going to get away with that? But I actually think he did.
I think that's a fair show of leniency.
As long as you do it safely, right? Like, that's the main thing.
Yeah. How many penalty points did he get?
That's the question.
Oh, he's banned next race.
You briefly touched on McLaren when we were talking about the start there. I mean, stellar qualifying for everyone involved.
They look great in quali.
Yeah. Norris 3rd. And then it all just came undone, didn't it, through those corners we've just been talking about. It took a little bit of a whack from, I want to say it was contact with Lewis, but I might be wrong there.
Yeah, it was
Lewis. He went into the back of Lewis.
Yeah.
So what happened was Hamilton had to back out a little bit because the two ahead of him were fighting.
Yeah.
And I think actually Sainz both of them had sort of gone off the racing line and kind of had to lift a little bit, and Hamilton's obviously behind that, and like, how much are they going to lift? So that car behind is always going to lift that little bit more, and then it's just a concertina effect going back all the way through the field, and that's what led to it. It was just a racing incident. It was just unfortunate.
Yeah,
it was no one's fault, I don't think.
This might be unpopular, but I feel like Norris could have been more cautious there. I think he was maybe sticking his nose alongside Hamilton. There's a little more than he maybe should have on turn 2 of a very long Grand Prix.
When you look at it, there's a little bit of a holding that inside line and trying to get out of turn 2 up the inside without any regard for like what might be going on around Lewis and the other cars. Like, there is a little bit of, I call it like eagerness to just get on the throttle and get out of turn 2 that is kind of what throws him up into the back of Lewis more than anything.
I think it probably was pushing a bit hard, but I think if you're not pushing that hard at the start of a race, then you're potentially giving up position. So
exactly.
I don't know.
This is why it's a racing incident, though, isn't it? Like, it is one of those things where, it's unfortunately played out a little bit clumsily. He knows what he's done. Like, it's just a shame that after taking the pit stop to change the nose and swap to the hards, they never got back in the race after such a good qualifying.
The grim thing for McLaren fans is that Norris said afterwards that even if he had have carried on without a broken front wing, he still doesn't think they'd have been able to get any points, which is pretty miserable for McLaren. I mean, it's wild that a car can qualify P3 and not have the pace for... But at the same time, I think, like, it's easy to forget while McLaren are struggling so much just how good Lando Norris is. Like, in the few years when McLaren sort of had the 4th, 5th fastest car, some of the stuff Norris did with that car was so impressive, especially in qualifying.
Yeah.
And this was kind of like a little glimpse of a reminder of like, hey, this kid is still phenomenally quick. But
yeah, he's got the goods, hasn't he? But let's not forget, qualifying was compromised. Qualifying was a weird session. It was not
true.
Qualifying.
But
as much as it looked like it on camera, I think you couldn't really tell where the wet patches were. Even like, I watched the wet race for the F2. I think it was the sprint race that was wet. I don't know if I didn't see the feature race, but that was when I tuned in. I didn't even realize the track was wet. It looked like a dry track, and then they get going, and obviously all the spray happens. It's like, obviously it's wet, but up until that point, like, it looked on camera like a dry track. So you can see how the drivers would. If it looks like that on camera, then what's it like to the drivers? You know.
Yeah,
weird session quality. I don't think it's quite the. I think it flattered certain teams, the track conditions in that qualifying session very much.
I definitely agree with that.
All this being said, we need to pick a driver of the day. So who out of that lot are you two going to go for?
So I was coming into this thinking I was going to push for Joe, but the conversation we've had about that incident, I feel like I've kind of talked myself out of it. I still think it was a really good drive, but that, as much as I maybe lean slightly more towards it should have been a penalty, I still think I don't love the way he approached that overtake and the way it played out.
I think he was going into that move knowing that he could frame it in a certain way, and make
especially the way he straight away was like protesting on the radio. I know they all do it, but I don't know. It felt a little bit premeditated, didn't it?
Egregious, wasn't it? It was egregious.
It's a smudge on an otherwise good drive, basically, isn't it?
Yes, I still think it was a really, really good drive from him.
Good drive overall, but a tarred with an ugly bit of gamesmanship.
Yeah.
I mean, Verstappen was just untouchable. But having said that, he did get a black and white flag for track limits, and he was just leading the race, which to me is just lazy. Like, why is he driving like that? Why does he need to do that? Like,
and then still go on to get fastest lap anyway, which was ridiculous.
Yeah. And also, he won it at a canter. He wasn't really pushing that car.
I mean, the gap was 24 seconds. I think it could easily have been 34 seconds.
Yeah. Well, I think Hamilton backed off as well. It would have been, if Hamilton had not backed off towards the end, it would have been about 15-ish seconds. So it's not over the course of 66 laps. That's not actually a humongous gap, but still, it's I mean, I don't think I can give Verstappen drive. I don't think you can get a black and white flag and get driver of the day. I think that'd be crazy. Other than that, though, again, amazing drive, like amazing car. He's got the perfect driver for that car, and he's absolutely doing the business. So well done to Verstappen. But in terms of driver of the day,
see, now you're going to find somebody else.
Is it crass to say Hamilton?
I'm kind of thinking it might be Hamilton as well. I think that was a really solid drive from him. Like when he started fourth he started. It was just
takes done on track.
It was just a solid drive, wasn't it? Like there was nothing super spectacular. It was just a very solid drive. I think he got the most out of that car. Again, Perez, you'd have expected more from. The Aston were kind of there or thereabouts. Yeah.
Stroll was, he was okay, but he lost positions, didn't he?
I can go with Hamilton.
I think it's Hamilton. I think it might be Hamilton. What do you think, Tom?
I mean, I was originally going with Verstappen. I think even black and white flags aside, it's pushing the boundaries of trying to set the fastest lap. That's what it is, and he's just out there on his own.
Also, picking the winner's boring.
The thing is, didn't win. I don't agree with you, Tom, because these are spread across the entirety of the Grand Prix. These are not at times when he's pushing. It wasn't like he was pushing for fastest laps when he was getting these warnings. It was literally multiple different corners across the circuit. And for me, it's just lapses in concentration. It feels like it doesn't feel like the kinds of mistakes that you make when you're really, really hitting it hard, trying to get that fastest lap. Because this is like all separated by a wide, there's big gaps between these warnings that he's had. It's not like he was a particular phase in the race when he was trying to push to get that fastest lap. So I can't agree there.
What really makes me laugh was all of the hand wringing about oh no, don't go fastest lap. You've got these warnings. He could have gone off the track 4 more times and picked up a 5-second penalty for each and still won the race. He wasn't nearly as dramatic as they were trying to make it out to be.
That's true, but the thing is, you don't want to win the race with a 5-second penalty hanging over your either, do you?
You don't.
That's unprofessional. I think if you win a race and you've got for no reason you've ended up with a 5-second penalty just through your own driving, I think that's a blot against your name.
Yeah. I just don't think it was as big a deal as they made it out to be. But
fair enough. But I think for someone who strives for perfection the way Verstappen does, it's strange to me that he allowed himself to do this.
Especially when he doesn't need that extra point for fastest lap in the grand scheme of things, but he always wants to go for it because he wants to maximize everything.
Yeah, and then what if there's a safety car right at the end?
That's true. That is true, and I guess that is what Red Bull was fearing.
That's Red Bull's fears, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, that could drop you to 5th or 6th probably of the line.
Totally.
That's where you don't want the penalty regardless of your gap. Is
exactly.
You don't know what's going to happen in those scenarios.
Anyway, we're giving it to Hamilton, are we?
Well, I'm outvoted, so we've got to. Move of the day. There's quite a few for this, and a good couple of them involve Mr. George Russell.
Russell had a couple of good ones. There's one on Ocon and one on Sainz. I've seen some people mentioning Alonso on Ocon, which was the one where he had to kind of dive into the pit exit and clip the grass on the way through, which I feel like that one looked spectacular, but he was still ahead before they got to the braking zone. Whereas Russell's ones were proper on the brakes into the corner, which I think I rated a little bit higher.
Yeah, the one around the outside on Sainz that he did into turn 1 was Well, I think was it that one? Was that around the outside? I saw that one and enjoyed that one a lot. So I think I'm going to go for that one.
Yeah. There was the that battle that you mentioned earlier, Tom, as well.
Yeah, that was one of those. Was up there for me.
Hulkenberg, Joe, Tsunoda. I feel like there was a fourth car involved as well. That was
it was Ocon coming out of the pits in front of him, basically.
That was it.
That kind of instigated it all. But yeah, that was something that was just overall good racing for a candidate for that for me.
I like the Russell one on Sainz though, I think, as well.
Yeah, I'm happy for it to go there.
Cool.
Georgia is.
There we go. And then last one for this week.
Honestly, what the f*** are we doing here?
Go. Nominations.
So we already mentioned, we've mentioned a few of the weird radio messages we had. You can go for any of them. I want to talk about the trophies. They were some of the worst trophies I've seen in a long time.
I didn't see it. I tuned out already.
They were just, it was just like a silver bowl. It almost looked like a dog's water bowl. They were really just a bit naff. And then Verstappen also got given a medal just out of nowhere. There was a medal as well. Like,
they did that. They did that on the last race as well. This has suddenly become a thing. Like, apparently, I think they've been getting them for like over a year, but they've only just started presenting them on the podium. Maybe
has Bernie snuck back in or something? Like,
it was. Yeah, this happened last week. Do you not remember this last week?
I think I stopped watching after they finished the race last week. To be honest with you.
Okay, the same thing happened. They Mohammed Ben Sulayem came up with a medal and put it over Verstappen's head.
So weird.
Because I think the theory is that trophies often end up with the teams, and the drivers have to get replicas made. If they want to keep the trophy, they have to have a replica made. So they want like an authentic thing that the driver can keep that is specific to the thing. But I just think it's another thing they can stick a corporate logo on, isn't it?
It is.
Like.
Yeah, it's
like Lewis Hamilton's got a warehouse somewhere full of those little Pirelli tyres for all his pole positions. The drivers don't want trinkets like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were particularly bad trophies, especially coming off the back of Monaco, which is like one of the coolest trophies.
I'm trying to remember what the trophy's normally like in Catalonia.
There was the time when it used to be like a steering wheel with like a silver bowl to the back of it.
Yeah, they were always really good.
They were pretty cool trophies, those.
Yeah. Well, there's the Australian trophy in Melbourne's like that, isn't it? It's a replica of Jack Brabham's steering wheel.
Yes,
that still exists for that one.
Not a big giant glass Heineken star, then.
No, but I do like
or the vase they get in Hungary.
Yeah, I do like the ones that have got the history to them like that, though. Like, even if it's not the most traditional looking thing like a vase in Hungary, like it is a tradition within that race, and it's kind of what we get. Like, there's obviously the big one that you get at Silverstone, the big golden one that Lewis loves to throw in the air.
The cool thing is it's related to the country that's hosting the race.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It's got a bit of sentiment to it usually, rather than just a big piece of corporate silverware.
Yeah.
Like with a massive logo on it. Like those ones kind of just a little bit gross to me.
Yeah. Did we ever work out what the Paul Ricard monkeys were?
It's just some Visit France thing, I think. It's like tourist board stuff.
So it is on the guise of what we're talking about, but a crap version, basically.
Well, like inspired by like a corporate exercise to get people to visit France. Like the Britain is great thing that they did for a while as well. Can you remember that? Oh, disgusting.
Well done, Baku. I kind of miss the Gorilla trophies now. Especially having seen these weird plates they had this weekend.
Yeah. Right.
But,
go on.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the Russell not being able to tell the difference between rain and sweat thing here. I suppose all he needed to do was wipe his visor, and he was like, he did go 4 laps before he realised. But there is like some comedy to that, I suppose. But I think the real one. I think you can mention like the Hamilton Russell collision in quality.
Yeah, of course, that's a good one.
Yeah, of course it is.
That was kind of wild. Like that was probably the most mental thing that happened all weekend.
Yeah, that's absolutely what it is.
Another WTF is just having a normal race weekend without shenanigans, without all the nonsense. Like, it was a pretty straightforward race. Not even a retirement from the race.
Yeah.
So you don't get more normal.
What is this normality?
Normal, but yeah, and I really enjoyed it. I had a really nice time just seeing the Formula One be Formula One for a change and not try to be everything else.
That combined with
the world.
Spain as a race being interesting after some of the years we've had in recent times, the circuit being interesting.
The circuit layout is great. I think this is a winner. The circuit layout is absolutely a winner. Like these
they've messed with it over the last few years. Just leave it be now. You've got it. You've done it.
You've nailed it. Don't mess with qualifying. Don't mess with the circuit. It seems like a good fun event for people to go to, and you've nailed it. Keep it up.
So now we've talked about the good bits. I would say Merc Collision was the big WTF.
I think so. Yeah,
it's got to be.
Okay, just checking.
It's a silly one and a bit mental.
Paul's just thrown in a random late nomination of WTF has to go to Discord being drunk. Obviously.
Oh God, yeah.
I
Discord
missed
just lost its mind on Sunday and was just. People were like trying to send messages and they weren't going through, and then it would just like randomly send the message about 10 minutes after it originally was submitted, and then just kept repeating the same messages over and over again. It basically turned into absolute chaos.
That's really helpful when your entire podcast community is on Discord and your entire cell of your podcast community is we do things live as they happen.
Not good for in-race conversation.
No.
I've thrown a bit of an extra thing into the document here that I didn't even prep either of you for. So I'm just going to drop it on you now. We're pretty much a third of the way through the season now, and we've got a little bit of a gap. So I thought it might be a nice time to just like drop in a couple of general thoughts on the season so far.
Okay. Do you want to hit us with yours, Chris, while we're thinking about us?
I mean, the headline one is obviously Verstappen already looks unbeatable. Like, I think we're going to need to be looking for our interest in terms of championships elsewhere for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
And on the plus side, everything behind him, I guess behind the Red Bulls, just is ridiculously close. Like, the times in qualifying were stupidly close. I think if you ignored Verstappen in Q3 this weekend, it was like 6 or 7 tenths covered the rest of the top 10. Like, it was ridiculous. And I feel like that order's probably going to keep changing.
Oh man, like it was less than that. Like, I think from second down to like 7th, there was no more than about 2 tenths covering them. It was crazy how close it was towards the end of qualifying. Absolutely crazy. Which is, I always make the comparison, but 2009 qualifying in Formula One was like the best year for qualifying in Formula One. And if we didn't have one person absolutely killing it, which is totally fine because they've earned it, but if we would be at that level of like closeness of qualifying if there wasn't that level of dominance going on.
And I think that is my other like big takeaway from the season so far is that I'm enjoying qualifying more than I have in a very long time this season. Qualifying is like fast becoming the don't miss part of the weekend. It's been so entertaining this year.
I mean, 2021 qualifying was wild because that was, real battles for pole position.
Yeah.
Like proper tight at the front. So, yeah, and there was just all this extra tension around that anyway, which, some people loved, other people didn't love so much. Is ancient history now, we hope. So, what are my thoughts third way through the season? I think obviously I'm excited to see what's going to happen with Aston for the remainder of the season. I'm pleased that there's a new kid on the block in the top 4 kind of thing. And it's nice to see that sort of top 4 shuffling around a little bit and not just being set in stone, not being like one, set order and that's how it is all season. It's good to see old faces doing really, really well as well. Alonso, there was a time when people didn't like Alonso. I've always been kind of, Alonso exists. But now I'm becoming an Alonso fan. Like, I really, really like Alonso. Just like I became a Vettel fan. I think it's the Aston effect.
Yeah, it's weird, right?
They just make drivers that used to be not that likable, very likable. Even Stroll, I'm kind of like, I've got getting a bit of a soft spot for. So, Yeah, and I think like my other big thought going in, I guess like coming into this sort of second third of the season maybe is how Mercedes have sort of done what they said they were going to do. You know, they've not committed to a flawed concept. They have made the changes. They've done what they needed to do, and at first glance, like these first 2 races that they've run these updates, they seem to have worked for them. And I think it's difficult to deny that they have moved forward. I think 2 races is enough to say, you know, that 2 very different races now, and they've been equally competitive at both. So going into the next one, I think the Canada race, if they're again another outlier track, if they're good there, then I said it earlier, it should stand them in good stead and give them a good platform to develop them for the rest of the season, and maybe even get some wins towards the end.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I can't really add anything much more to what you've already both said.
Yeah, we've kind of like blasted
you've
loads out there.
Done it all. Covered it all. I'll just do predictions. So, an actually okay weekend, I guess, for at least me and Stu. We got the double Verstappen because we just went sensible. Chris, however, smashed a 4-pointer with a double Verstappen and the no DNF 20 finishes.
Knew where your mouth is.
Mm-hmm.
Worked.
Yeah, money mouth, and it worked. However, one person did slightly better. Dick Carlson got a full 5 out of 5 because he also got Alexander Albon's position in 16th, spot on. Which actually, Chris,
well done.
Credit to you. You were only 1 position out on that as well.
So close.
So close.
Yeah. That would have been your first 5 out of 5.
Yeah.
I think it might have been. Yeah, I don't think I ever got it.
Yeah. So, but yeah, well done to Dick Carlson on that one. So you reach out to us, let us know through your preferred social media contact method or email, and we'll sort out your prize. I want to just point
out... First of the year, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the first one of this year. I was just wanting to point out a huge commiserations to James Hadley, who, when I was looking through the results, got 4 out of 5 because they didn't money mouth.
Oh, no.
So
There's the vets.
James had, double Verstappen with no DNFs, but then picked 18 finishes with Albon in 16th. So that bet hedging has got to hurt slightly.
It's got to sting.
He's okay. He's playing the long game.
Still good points for the overall leaderboard, though. Still very good points for that. Speaking of, our current leader is Benjamin Claxton on 16 points. And then there's a whole trope of people on 15 points right behind. So still lots to play for there in this very long season. Even if we are a third of the way through it, there's still a long way to go. And
I must have caught up a smidge now, right?
Probably. I haven't looked where we...
I'm only 11.
There you go.
That's not too far.
You've actually leapfrogged the Stu and I. I don't know if you were above Stu already, but you've definitely leapfrogged me. If you haven't, leapfrogged Stu as well.
Yeah.
It's Chris's year.
I'll take it.
It's the year of the Chris.
I don't think I've ever won between the three of us, have I?
No, I think it's unfortunately for you. It's always been me or Stu.
This is it. This is my year.
Have I ever won? I don't think.
You've
you two have both won.
You've definitely won at least one. At least one.
I know. I won the F1 Fantasy League, the F1 Digital Team Fantasy League one year.
Yes, you did win that as well. That was probably
that's unimportant. Though. It's ours that matters.
I think that's the same year you won predictions.
That was your
year. I had
a
really good year. That was my. Well, I mean, I worked every race that year. I knew when you're that involved and you're watching all the time and
you were living
stories it. And I really was living Formula One in those days. So,
for better or worse.
Yeah.
I'm quite a long way down in this.
In terms of fantasy, we've got the Spinquisition. I mean, it's a name we've mentioned all season. Winner. Tied for first this weekend. I apologise. Red Bull USA both got 301 points there, but it means that the Spinquisition is still at the top of the official F1 fantasy board at 2,164 points. And then when it comes to Grid Rival, Rohan was this week's top scorer with 1,059 points. But there's been a change in the overall standings as Effortless Lee goes to the top, a name we know from last season as well. 6,992 points for Lee. So congratulations to all you movers around and winners.
Movers and shakers.
Movers and shakers. If you want to get involved with any of this, just head to backofthegrid.com. There's links there to both of the fantasy leagues that we run, and you can also go through the prediction standings, register yourself up if you want to go it next time out when we come around to doing Canada. And yeah, it's always worth doing. There's also a bit of a contact form if you do want to reach out and contact us that way. Speaking of contacting us, I think it's time for some inbox, isn't it, gentlemen?
Yeah.
Yes.
Keep it saying now. But stay out. Box. Hey, man.
I'll take the first one. It is from Tommy Perez, and it says, so you guys love the Barcelona circuit. What do you guys think makes a good race course? Interesting question. What does make a good race course?
I wouldn't say I love Barcelona as well. It's gone up my estimation after this weekend.
We were excited about the changes, weren't we? I think that's maybe where that's come from. We were excited to see what the changes did.
Not having a clumsy, slow chicane, that makes a good race course, it turns out.
Yeah.
It's like, there's a few like elements, right? Like, you want a circuit that's got kind of a flow to it.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily make for a good circuit for racing. It's maybe something exciting. Like Mugello, for example, in qualifying, amazing circuit. Like, the way the cars move through that, phenomenal. As a circuit for racing on, it didn't really deliver all that much. Like, there's...
But it didn't have an opportunity, did it? Because it only hosted like 2 races. So
it did, and one of them was a hot mess.
Yeah.
I think you definitely, flow is like a huge part of it. And I think this year, this circuit has had, it's the most you've seen this circuit ever have flow. And I think if you've ever driven it on Gran Turismo or any of the sims, then it is a really, really, really enjoyable circuit to drive. And I think that's a really important thing. I think the drivers need to enjoy driving the circuits. I think that should be the minimum, right? Like, this is Formula One. These are supposed to be the best drivers in the world, driving on the best circuits in the world. And a prerequisite of being one of the best circuits in the world surely has to be that it's enjoyable to drive around.
Yeah. I mean,
and there's a surprising amount on the F1 calendar that aren't enjoyable to drive around.
I feel like it's getting the balance right between some sort of like high braking zone and general flow. And I feel like the circuits that do that well are the ones that I personally enjoy watching the most, because it tends to produce the best sort of action. Like, I mean, some might disagree, but I think Monza's good for that. Like, there's high braking zones which create overtaking, but there's also elements where you've got a bit of flow to it, like Ascari, for example. Like, you've got like a nice combination.
Parabolica.
And yeah, I mean, the first chicane is maybe getting a little bit clumsy in these cars these days and possibly needs looking at, but you need that braking zone at the end of that start-finish straight. And you've got the one into the second chicane as well in turns 4 and 5, it is officially, isn't it? And
I think,
and like the Lesmos have got the flow. Like, there's a bit of a combination of the two, and that's what I like. At least that's what I think is a good circuit.
I think you're dead right. I think that those are the two main things: flow and overtaking opportunities. Basically, that's what you need.
Yeah. There you go.
There you go. Next one.
Next one from Bobsy Cat. Here's a question that came up during the race. If DRS is an overtaking feature, why is it used in qualifying? Should DRS be axed from quali?
That's a good question.
It's an interesting question.
I think if it's there, so like, I think for me, like, part of the reason, well, for F1, part of the reason they like it is because it's a very visual, moving part of the car that you can see happen. Like, it gives the commentators an opportunity to say an extra thing about how fast the car's going, how much the driver is pushing when they say DRS wide open.
Which really bothers me, by the way.
Yeah, no,
it's either open or it's closed. It's not like, oh, I'll just open it halfway.
Yeah, exactly. But it is like a fun superlative for them to use.
Yeah, no, you're right.
And engage the audience with. So there's that. If it was up to me, I think you'd let them use DRS wherever on the track. I don't get why there's DRS zones.
I mean, yeah,
I do get why it's safety, but I think
in qualifying
really,
they used to have free reign. If you remember, early days of DRS, it used to be
great.
Racing wise, there were the zones, and it's kind of always been like that there. But then qualifying wise, you could just pop it whenever you wanted. I
think there's a better way of implementing DRS as well. I think like the being 1 second behind rule is kind of arbitrary. I feel like maybe giving them a limited number of times they could use it would possibly make races a little bit more dynamic, and it wouldn't be that huge of a lift for them to update the graphics and say how many implementations of that they've got left, and just allow them to use it anywhere on the track.
That's how, I don't know, I can't remember if it's still the same, but that's how like the lower formulas like F2 and F3 implemented it for a while, wasn't it? Where you could use it, but you only had so many instances of it. I'm sure the lower formulas did something like that.
I think you're thinking of when F2 first had, it was some kind of push to pass system. They had a limited number of uses.
That might be what I'm thinking of them rather than DRS.
Because I guess the danger is if you open it up more is that every time someone tries to use it to overtake, the other driver will use it to defend, and it just kind of cancels itself.
But if you've only got like 10, I mean, there's an arbitrary number that, but if you've only got a certain number,
you only get you've got a limited number of attacks and a limited number of defenses. So then it adds an element of strategy on the driver's side of how much am I going to use this resource? Do I need to save it? Am I going to use it to get the fastest lap towards the end? Am I going to try and save it for that? Am I going to use it just purely for attacking? And then if I need to defend, then I'll try and attack again and overtake. Like, I think you'd probably get slightly more dynamic races if you did allow a little bit more freedom of the use of DRS, and it's there. So why not? And I also think I don't really like the way at certain circuits that DRS is a lot more powerful than it is at others. And I also don't like the way that certain teams have a much more powerful DRS than others. It seems weird to me. I understand why and how it's happened because they've developed that into the car, and that's credit to them for doing that. But I think when it's that powerful for one particular car and you don't have anything to defend with on certain straights, then that kind of ruins the racing for me. It shouldn't be push to pass. It should be a strategic speed boost, if you like.
Because it's impossible to make it a spec part, because then you're making part of the aerodynamic spec, and then you're getting way too far away from what F1 kind of is.
Yeah, exactly.
But to go back to the DRS and qualifying thing, I think just at a fundamental level, like, I see qualifying as when cars and drivers should be out there going as fast as they are possible to go, and DRS is a thing that makes you go faster. So on that alone, I'm kind of fine with it being used there.
Yeah, that's fair. Next one, Jeff. Hola, chicos. This week's question is not about Ferrari, surprisingly enough. Our resident Ferrari fan, Jeff, obviously. But he's saying, I really thought Magnussen would show Hülkenberg up this season. It's not even as if Kevin is racing as well as he did last season, and Haas actually have a better car this year compared to last. Has Magnussen pulled a page from Ricciardo's playbook and now can no longer manage the car? Or Hulk shouldn't be wiping the floor with Kevin, and I've always rated them about the same talent-wise. What are your thoughts?
He has
tough one.
Hülkenberg has kind of come back like he never left, hasn't he? I mean, I know from when he subbed in for Racing Point in Aston Martin a couple of times, he kind of did the same thing. But so it's not the biggest surprise, I guess. But he has just got back and got on with the job. He's doing well in what is, again, a frustrating car. He qualified so well this weekend and then just went backwards because Haas seem to struggle to make a car with race pace these days.
Yeah, I think I've always liked Nico because of this sort of ability. I mean, yes, he probably could have done more at times, but generally speaking, he is so adaptable and pretty consistent at what, I mean, he was so consistent, he never scored a podium no matter how close he could have been. Aha. But no, joking aside, like he's always been a solid driver, and I think he's proven that like the years when he jumped into WEC and did Le Mans and stuff like that. Like I've always had a lot of respect and a lot of time for Hülkenberg as a driver. And I think they brought him back at the right time for the same reason that they originally brought K-Mag back, which was a driver that knows recent era Formula One and can help them develop the car. Am I surprised he's doing better than Magnussen? I would say no, because of how I sort of rate Hülkenberg anyway. Would I say he's wiping the floor with him like Jeff says in the question? Probably not. Definitely performing better, but I don't think it's as extreme as that is where I would put it.
That's kind of what I was thinking as well. Yeah, I don't think I'd quite go that far, but I definitely would have expected Magnussen to be ahead of him at this point.
I think it's going to be one of those battles that ebbs and flows over the season. I think
Could
in
well
that
be.
car, I don't necessarily think it's going to be. I don't think it's all cut and dry between those two drivers yet.
Yeah.
So my response to this question is ask me again. Maybe when we're 2/3 through the season and we've got a bit more of a measuring post.
It'd be interesting to see where the next third of the season goes, though, wouldn't it, going into the summer break? Because you might find that he's suddenly on a knife edge and they're neck and neck again, which would be really interesting.
Exactly. Okay, last couple really quick then. McCheco, hey man, Alonso is conjuring up a false sense of security between himself and Lance and will savagely betray him in the most spectacular way imaginable before the season is out. Discuss.
I mean, I stand on record as saying earlier he's a wily fox and he is always up to something. I'm not saying that that's what it is, but...
We said it earlier. We touched on it earlier. He's paying it forward. I think that's what this message kind of alludes to as well. Like he's doing all the nice things now so that later on in the season when it's getting towards the end and he's wanting a few more points and we're down to the business end, then he can be he's slowly shaped. Well, he clearly is the dominant side of that team. There's no doubt about that. And I think by doing this, that just reinforces that fact even more. Everything he's doing shows that he's the boss there,
he's essentially got
both
sides of the garage on his side with things like this, because everyone, even on Lance's side of the garage, is going to be more than happy to support Fernando in something because of these sort of like the little compliments of I saw that move into turn whatever, like what position was it for? It was a good move, like, or not aggressively fighting him for this position when, like, big picture, it's not going to matter if they finish one way round or the other in terms of the team. Like, these are all things that the wider team like will be, wow, this guy's like humble and we've got a lot of respect for him. And then when he wants something, he'll get it instantly.
He's managed to like generate a situation where by kind of rolling over and letting Lance beat him, it's actually like a massive power move.
Yeah.
It's such an Alonso thing to do, but like, the second there's a win on the cards, like the gloves come off completely, especially if next season they are like still at the front and maybe even fighting for wins. Like, gloves are off completely.
This is it. Like, I think that's what a lot of this is about, is that if he can see, he's obviously seeing things that he likes in the development of that team. So he's thinking, I mean, who isn't seeing things that, like, that team is on the front foot. They're going forward. I think he is looking towards next season thinking, right, I'll do all these favors now. I've reinforced my power more and more and more and more. And then when it comes to next season, I will be owed a lot by this team. And that's where he's going to be.
Playing the long game.
Yep.
Yeah, big time.
4D chess, man.
Next one.
Next one from Jose V. Ciao Amici? Sure. Do you think Ferrari's upgrades will bring about significant improvement in their constructors' ranking? How does it compare to the Mercedes upgrades? I don't believe we had a proper chance to compare in Spain since the strategy from Ferrari was so creatively different to expectations. In other words, crap.
I think it doesn't matter what upgrades you bring to your car. If you don't have the strategy to follow up with it, then you're not going to do it.
Mm-hmm. And I'm also starting to feel like, as much as the talk at the start of the season was about Mercedes not doing the business with their car, I'm kind of starting to feel like the Ferrari is actually a more fundamentally flawed package than the Mercedes is. And I don't know how far that can develop themselves out of this hole.
I was just going to say, you lose more winning opportunities with bad strategy than you do with a bad car, if that makes sense. Like, you throw away more with poor strategy and poor calls.
The cars are so close that like it's the strategy that often makes the difference.
And in this era in particular, like we've already talked about how close qualifying is and stuff like that. Like, when you take the Red Bulls out of the mix, which is kind of what we're doing here, is like who's going to get that second place. It's not mattered for Mercedes up to this point that they've not had the strongest car. They've still been ahead of Ferrari. They're now ahead of Aston. I mean, yes, fair enough. Part of that is owed to upgrades, but ultimately, it's a combination of a poor car being strengthened, but also consistently good strategy.
And having two very good
cars. And the drivers. But, I mean, I think if you lift, like, say, Leclerc and Carlos Sainz out of that Ferrari, stick them as the Red Bull pair, stick them as a Mercedes pair, they're off winning races week in, week out. I don't think the driver pairing at Ferrari is anything to do with the problem. It's Ferrari.
It never has been. It hasn't been for a long time.
It's strategy and direction from Ferrari.
They had Kimi Raikkonen, they've had Fernando Alonso, they've had Sebastian Vettel.
Think who's been there.
Charles Leclerc, they've had Carlos Sainz, they've had...
We've said this so many times.
Yeah.
Okay, last one, quick.
Yes, last one. Paul says, "Hey man, should we all be off to the bookies to put a bet on Red Bull winning all the races this season?"
I won't tell you how to spend your money, but I'm not a betting man either, he says, but it doesn't seem like a bad bet to me.
Yeah.
I don't think they will. I think they're going to win the vast majority of them, but over a season, something always happens.
Generally. And to be fair... I think
when there's this many races as well, there's 22, 23 races. So you are going to struggle to win every single one of those.
To be fair, one good way of making sure that they don't win every race, if you don't want it to happen, is to probably put a bet on it, in my experience.
Actually.
So go get the odds.
There's a reason my friend who's an Arsenal fan puts a lot of bets on Tottenham to win.
I mean, it works. Right. That wraps up Inbox for this week. So thank you to everyone who has joined us. Special thank you to everyone in Discord who obviously join us live every week, get involved with the chat and so on. If you want to be part of that, head to patreon.com/back of the grid. If you want to get in touch with us the normal ways, you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And as I mentioned earlier, head to backofthegrid.com where there's a contact form as well. And you can register for all the Predictions League and join the Fantasy Leagues. That is all that. Worth a quick
mention.
Leave a comment
below if you're watching on YouTube.
Yeah, YouTube stuff's new. That's the one bit I keep forgetting. So please like, subscribe if you do the YouTube thing. Leave your comments.
And if you've got this far, thank you so much for listening as well.
Of course. Worth a quick cheeky mention that the Le Mans 24 Hours is this weekend. Jenson Button, obviously one of our all-time favourite drivers between the three of us, probably combined, is racing a modified NASCAR Chevy. I can't remember the model now.
Did you see any of the practice times?
Yeah, so to quickly touch on this, that car looks mega.
Yeah.
It looks mega. Everyone thought it was just going to like barrel down the straights and then like fall over in every corner. But in actual fact, they've sort of modified it in a way that they've sort of sacrificed some of the top speed just to get it through the corners. And oh my God, it's competing with the GTEs and it looks awesome.
Yeah, I think in practice it was faster than all the GTMs.
They do have decent suspension travel on them, those things.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
Like, you can set them up to be really, really good road race cars, like touring car almost. So and they're running I don't know what tyres they're running there. Are they running
I'm
NASCAR
not sure.
Tires, or are they
They're running definitely something higher profile than what a lot of other cars there will be running, 100%, from what I've seen.
It's also enormous compared to other cars in that grid,
huge.
and it sounds like an absolute deep
Big V8.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, have a look on YouTube. There's some.
If you're planning on watching some Le Mans this weekend and want some people to chat to, I know I'm going to be watching a lot of it, and lots of Discord people will. So
yeah,
there we go. Join the Discord for our F1 podcast to watch the Le Mans 24 hour. There's an advert.
There you go.
If there was one. Right. Thank you very much, everyone, and we will see you next week as we start looking ahead to Canada. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Well done.